Well, hello there, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, here for the 75th episode of Goulet Q&A. This is April 24th of 2015, and I am very sorry that I missed last week. I ended up being pretty sick. I had bronchitis. I'm not sure if it was bronchitis or pneumonia, because I did spike a little bit of a fever. I don't know. I went and see the doctor. They weren't 100% sure, but it was something kind of nasty. So I got a little bit of a cough. Hopefully it won't manifest itself in this Q&A today. But, you know, it's something that's kind of lingering a little bit. It was crazy. So I started to feel kind of sick towards the end of the previous week. But what ended up happening was that weekend, which was 2 weekends ago, I guess, at this point, my kids both started to get a really bad cough. And they started to have some trouble hearing, so we took them to the doctor. Both my kids had a double ear infection and walking pneumonia, and I had either pneumonia or bronchitis. Thankfully, Rachel was doing okay, so she was taking care of a whole sick household. We ended up missing 4 days of work trying to recover off that, so that's why I had to cancel the Q&A, because I was just laid out. It's not often that I get really sick like that, but when I do it 100%. So I was definitely not in the best of shape, and but now I'm back, and it's kind of crazy because my schedule coming up for the next several weeks is kind of ridiculous. I'm gone. I'm in this organization called the Virginia Council of CEOs. It's a roundtable group with other business owners. So we have our annual retreat coming up for 2 days at the end of this week. So actually, normally I would shoot this video on Thursday. I'm actually shooting it on Tuesday, the 21st. So a few days lead time, but I have a lot of good questions to pull from because I didn't shoot the video last week, so it really kind of works out. And then next week, Rachel and I are going to be gone on a family vacation. We're going to Disney World, so that's pretty exciting. But I'm going to shoot a Q&A tomorrow on Wednesday for next week, so that I still kind of keep it going. So we have a lot of good questions, so I'm going to be able to pound them all out. So my week this week is kind of insane because I'm trying to cram in basically like 2 weeks worth of work in 3 days. So it's kind of nuts, but that's okay. I'm still here for you in Q&A. So to catch you up to speed, got some cool things going on. I'm just going to touch on some products that we've had come in. We have Monteverde Mountains of the World is a new pen style that's come out, 3 different colors. It's kind of neat. J.R. Bond Blue Ocean has changed. It used to only just be a straight up blue ink, but now they've put a gold fleck in it just like they have with Stormy Gray, and it's pretty awesome, I gotta say. So that's been really popular. And I actually think I still need to go back and edit my video, because when the ink originally came out, we thought it was going to have a sheen to it. It did not. I was very disappointed, but now it does, so that's really pretty awesome. So I'll try to do something with that. Because of my schedule, the video thing is just like not going to happen for right now, but I'm working on it. Monteverde and Vincia came out with 2 new ones. It's got a carbon fiber body, but then they have an anodized aluminum cap in an orange and a green. Really looks pretty slick, gotta say. I like that pen anyway, and it's kind of digging that color. Especially the orange one looks exactly like the Lamy Copper Orange that just came out. It's pretty much a coincidence because they've been developing these pens for a while, but they just happen to pick like the exact same colors. Kind of neat. And then Monteverde Jewelria just came out. Monteverde's got a lot of things going on. But they have 4 new colors in the Jewelria, kind of these candy-looking colors. It looks pretty nice. So kind of freshen up that line a little bit. And then the Lamy Safari Neon Lime we're waiting for like any day. You know, and it could come in this week, so maybe we'll have it in by the time this video publishes. I don't know. It's already been pushed out a couple of weeks. We thought we were going to have it a couple of weeks ago. So really, we're literally just kind of sitting around waiting for it to come, trying to get word from Lamy, from our distributor to see when that pen is actually coming, but it should be here. And the ink too should be here at some point. And then I do have one little piece of juicy info that I think you might enjoy. You may or may not have noticed on the site. I think we're planning on getting it up on our site on the same day that this video is going to publish, so maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. I've had a lot of questions in the past about Tomoe River. And I have been I've basically just had to flat out lie for the last several weeks about it. We have Tomoe River in our shop. We've set up a distributorship, so we're getting it direct from Japan. And sorry, I shouldn't say we set up a distributorship. We've established our own distribution, I guess. We're not going to be retailing it out to other retailers like a normal U.S. distributor would. We're going to be buying it direct from Japan. We got it nicely packaged and everything, so that's something we've been talking to them about for 2 years probably, but it's finally here. So it's going to take us a few days. We're going to get it up on the site, and then we're going to launch it next week. So look for that. That's going to be pretty exciting. So we're going to have 2 different colors, a white and an off-white, which are not like super drastically different from each other, but it's subtle. And then we're going to have it in, so it's A4 loose sheets, and then we're going to have it in tablet form as well, which is the same paper, just in a bound tablet. It's a little more expensive, so I'm anticipating that the loose sheets are going to be a lot more popular. Yeah, we finally got it, so that's pretty darn exciting. So get ready for that. Sign up for the email notification list on the product pages if you want to know as soon as we put it in stock. We're planning to launch it on Wednesday. I'm sure we'll have it in the newsletter and everything too. So that is pretty friggin' exciting. So that is pretty much all I've been up to. So let's go ahead and get into the questions for this week. In pens and writing, I got a couple of questions here for this week. First question from Prechaya F on Facebook. I would like to purchase my first Edison pen, but I can't decide on which one on the production line to get. I like the size of the Vanishing Point, Metropolitan, and the Parker Sonnet, but I hate the feel of the Lamy Al-Star. Okay. The Lamy Al-Star, it's kind of hit or miss. I think the triangular grip is what most people don't like, or it's, the people that don't like it is what they don't like. I don't like it for long writing periods, but for quick notes and stuff, it doesn't bother me at all. But it is a little bit thin for my taste. And you're talking about Vanishing Point, Metropolitan. Those are a little bit fat, especially the Vanishing Point. The grip on that's going to be a little bit fatter. So, I think that most of the Edisons that you're going to get are going to be thicker than that. So pretty much any of them will be, more favorable for you than the Lamy is. So I said stick with kind of the thinner Edisons though, because some of them tend to, like the Collier is really big, so I would stick more with something like the Beaumonts, the Premier, maybe the Herald, and the Perlette is much smaller. I don't know, and that one uses, smaller nib. The Edison number 5 nibs I'm not quite as crazy about as I am with the number 6s. I like the number 6s a lot. Excuse me. So clearly I favor the Premier because it's our flagship Edison pen. It's one that we developed with them. It's exclusive to Goulet. But that aside, my own plug aside, I actually do think the Premier would be a great size for you based on the pens that you mentioned. So I would check that out if you find it appealing. But the Herald is kind of close, and the Beaumont as well, I think is pretty good. So check those ones out. And they're all the same price, $149. Gary W. on Facebook has the next question. I'm curious as to how you would maintain the outside of a fountain pen. For instance, how would you care for and keep clean the rhodium trim, gold trim, acrylic exterior, or the resin exterior? That's the same thing. Resin and acrylic are the same thing. What polishes or cleaning cloths are safe to use on the exterior of a fountain pen? And how about scratch removal? Okay, so this is a good question. I deal only with new pens, so I don't sell anything vintage or anything like that. So I don't get asked about cleaning and restoration, or like restoration and scratch removal and stuff all that much, but I have picked up a couple tricks here and there. I actually come from a pen making background, so I would literally turn acrylic pens by hand and polish them. So I know all the steps that it takes to take a raw block of acrylic and turn it into a very shiny looking object. So it all depends on how deep the scratch is, as far as how aggressive you want to go with it. If it's a really deep scratch, then you're getting into pretty much restoration stuff, and that really kind of gets beyond what I would recommend for people that don't kind of really know what they're doing. For the thing that I like the most for just regular upkeep and maintenance and stuff is a jeweler's cloth. So you can get that any jewelry store, any place that has jewelry, any department store, they'll have it. I don't know of any specific brand or whatever that does it. I have mine around here somewhere. I looked for it for 5 seconds to try to find it, and my office is still just really a mess because I just moved a couple weeks ago and then I've been sick and all that. So I don't know where anything is in my office right now, but it's go look up a jeweler's cloth. It's basically a cloth, usually it's a two-sided cloth. There's 2 different parts to it that have a very fine polishing compound kind of embedded in the cloth. So it really helps to shine up specifically metal, which is nice, but it works on acrylic too. So you can use, especially there's usually a more aggressive one and then a finer one. You can use the more aggressive one on your acrylic, the finer one on your metal, the trim. So it's not going to harm it or anything like that. Going with anything more aggressive than a jeweler's cloth that's when you need to really be careful around the metal trim on your pen. Specifically anything that is plated, which is pretty much everything these days. Some older pens may have like solid gold trim that you don't have to worry about quite as much, but that's usually not the case today. And when they do plating, gold plating and rhodium plating and stuff like that, the plating on the metal is not that thick. You know, it's durable and it's thick enough to endure wear and stuff, but when you're actually polishing it away, you can actually wear through it and get to the metal underneath, which is usually some kind of brass or some kind of other, you know, steel or something like that, which is not going to be that pretty. So you got to be careful when you go anything more aggressive than a jeweler's cloth when you're polishing up your pens to stay off the hardware, stay only on the material, the body of the pen. So if you want to go a little more aggressive than that, you can get polishing compounds and stuff like that. They make acrylic polish. Hut Perfect Plastic Polish is stuff that I used back when I was turning pens. That works really well. And so I'll use that from time to time when I want to shine it up. But the jeweler's cloth also does a pretty good job with that. More aggressive than that, you really need to go with an abrasive like a micro mesh. Micro mesh is a really fine abrasive, and there's all these different grades of micro mesh that you can get. 12,000 grit is the finest you can get, and it kind of goes up from there. We do sell micro mesh, the 12,000 grit micro mesh at Goulet. So you could do that. You can also buy micro mesh in much coarser grades, which if you got a really deep scratch, that's when you go with the coarser grades. So for my pen making days, I have like a multi-pack of all these things. I go to like a 3600 grit or a 2400 or something like that. And the thing is though, when you're sanding, like actually sanding away material like that, you have to go up every single grade from there. So I have like a kit that's like 12 grades or something like that. So if I go down to like a 2400, that's like 8 grades from the 12,000. So I have to then go 2400 and then go to 3200 and then 3600 and then 40 whatever 100, you know. So it's like you got to go all the grades up and then you polish it. So it really takes some time. And if you go too aggressively, you can actually like wear a dent into your pen and stuff like that. So you really kind of got to weigh that thing out. If you got a really deep scratch, depending on the pen, you may not be able to fix it that great. You might be able to get the scratch out, but then it might give you like a warp or a lump in your pen. So it really kind of depends. And so I would recommend first going with the jeweler's cloth to see how much of it you can get. You know, whenever you're using a cloth, like whenever you're just in general, whenever you're sanding or polishing anything, if you go too aggressive, it's really hard to come back from that. It's always better to stay, you know, on the safe side and to just polish longer. You know, if you will use a jeweler's cloth or something and just polish for a long time, you'll still eventually wear it away as if you had started, you know, a more aggressive and then gone up. But it's going to be a little bit safer, and you can kind of gut check yourself and continually check on your work and see if it's really helping or whether it's causing any indentation or something like that. But that's what I think is the safest bet just for regular maintenance of your pens. And then if you really get a deep scratch or something like that, that one you may want to be careful about, especially if it's a pen that's of particular value. You may want to actually look at sending it to someone that does restoration stuff because they deal with that stuff more regularly. But that's my advice. All right, I got a couple ink questions. First one, Brian W. on Facebook says, I've noticed several new nicely shading orange inks in the new products recently. How do they compare with the old standby Noodler's Apache Sunset? Like Lamy Copper Orange, Diamond Autumn Oak. Apache Sunset, ooh, that is a fantastic orange. I really love that one. Specifically for the shading. I mean, you just can't beat that ink. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't. Nothing in that orange shade will touch Apache Sunset. Apache Sunset's a little lighter, and depending on how wet it is and what kind of paper and stuff like that, it can range anywhere from like a yellow to an orange to almost a red. It just varies that much. No other, especially orange ink that I know, actually changes color with its shading like Apache Sunset can. Yes, you can get ones that are like from light to dark, but nothing will be as drastic as Apache Sunset. So let me kind of set it up like that and say there really isn't a replacement for Apache Sunset. It pretty much is the ultimate. However, you know, Lamy Copper Orange, Diamond Autumn Oak, those are kind of some of the closer ones to it. Let's see here. Autumn Oak is nice. It's definitely darker. The shading is not quite as intense. It's got more of a brown tone to it than the Apache Sunset. It's more of orange with a yellow tone, so it's got a lighter highlights coming to it. Autumn Oak is a similar orange, but it's got more brown tones to it. So it's going to be it's going to tend to pull a little bit darker, be a little more subdued. And then Copper Orange is nice, does shade pretty well. That one though is going to be, I would actually consider that kind of closer to more Noodler's Habanero than I would to Apache Sunset. It's going to be a little bit darker than Apache Sunset, and it doesn't have like that strong yellow component to it. So Noodler's Habanero would be a good one there to substitute, because Lamy Copper Orange has not been available. It's a limited edition ink, and I'm hearing rumors about it really not being available for very long. I'm still waiting to get some kind of confirmation on that, but it just might not be available for very long. So I would look for substitutes on that one. So if you like the Copper Orange, look at Noodler's Habanero. Otherwise, Apache Sunset is just the bee's knees. All right, next question. Yunus E on Facebook asked, I do not know if you already covered, but could you tell us which inks require more maintenance, be cleaned more often, and would harm the nib, feed, or the pen body itself? Okay, so first let me say that the whole like harming of the pen kind of thing really gets overdone. It gets overhyped or over dehyped or whatever you call it. People really jump on some inks for the way that they will temporarily stain some pens or some perceived damage to it. Yes, there are some inks that will have some issues with certain pens. Particularly I've been shooting emails back and forth between different like nibmeisters and stuff like that. There's some strong language out there about Noodler's specifically catches a lot of flack for harming pens, and Bay State Blue is like the poster child for dangerous inks. There's a lot of people that use that ink very successfully in a lot of their pens. The ones that I've seen that have been the most troublesome have been certain inks. Have been troublesome in certain sack filling pens, especially like vintage sack filling pens. I'm still trying to talk to some people and see, because I don't deal with that stuff regularly, nor do I hear a lot of issues, but I have heard of enough where it's like, okay, there might be some kind of correlation, but it's hard because a lot of the sacks and stuff like that, you don't necessarily know what they're made of, especially if they're a lot older, and you don't know what condition they were in anyway. And then the inks that come out, you don't really know what the properties are because they don't publish like MSDS sheets and stuff for these inks. So a lot of it is just kind of guessing. So, unless I am hearing about something and able to see like a very noticeable trend, which I really haven't, it's hard for me to make like definitive statements. So as far as like just harming the pens and stuff like that, I really don't have anything that solid to say like you definitely shouldn't use such and such ink and such pen. There are nibmeisters out there, like I know Richard Binder's got something that says like don't use Bay State Blue in a pilot pen. I haven't really seen that being an issue personally. Don't use certain inks in these latex sacks and stuff like that. I've been talking with Brian Gray. He's had a few inks, like the more saturated ones that have had some issues in his latex sacks. So I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that, but not to scare you too much. It's very rare in the grand scheme of things that actually happens. But the ones that I think is way more of an issue, forgive me, is just pens that are stubborn to clean and that can clog and stuff like that. Not necessarily like causing permanent damage to your pens, but just ones that are higher maintenance and are a little more hassle. That is probably 99% of what people talk about when they say it'll damage your pens. They're not talking about permanent damage, they're talking just in extremes of, inks that require a little more knowledge, a little more maintenance. So some of those, I've got some of those kind of summarized here. Any pigmented ink, so platinum carbon black, any of the Sailor Nano inks, the Kiwaguro or the Seiboku, the platinum like pigmented blue, pigmented rose, and pigmented sepia. Those are the only pigmented inks that I can think of that are safe for fountain pens. Normally pigmented inks are calligraphy inks that you do not want to use in fountain pens. But those 6 inks that I just named you, the Sailor and the platinum ones, those are safe for fountain pens. However, they're pigmented, so they have small pigments in them, just like latex paint has pigment in it instead of dye, because it's really good at light fastness. That's mainly why it is. But if you think about it, there's very small pigments that are flowing through this very small feed channel in your fountain pen. If it dries up or you don't clean it out regularly or whatever, then it's going to be much more likely to clog because you have actual small physical objects that are flowing through that feed instead of just a liquid dye, which is what most fountain pen ink is made of. So any pigmented ink that you use, you're going to have a more likelihood of higher maintenance. Iron gall ink, like diamine registrars. I know there's some others out there. Rowan Klingner has a couple. Salix, Scabiosa. Salix? Salix. I don't know why I call it Salix. I always call it Salix. Scabiosa. Those are iron gall. I don't hear about as many issues with those. Diamine registrars is one of the more truer iron gall inks that I hear for fountain pens. Most everything else is some kind of like modern formulation, and even that, you know, that's like much less true iron gall. True iron gall is only used for calligraphy, and its stuff is like, it's like tar. You know what I mean? It's like an India ink almost. But the registrars is still a modern formula, but it's a little closer to it. And the whole thing with iron gall, you can look, Wikipedia's got a really good page if you look up iron gall ink, but it's a natural ink that comes from oak galls, and it's acidic, so it's slightly corrosive. So it's just, you'll want to clean it out, you don't want to leave it in a super valuable pen for long periods of time, that kind of thing. So it's more just, you have to kind of watch out a little bit. I've heard about a couple of issues with diamine registrars, like that people use it in the same pen over a very extended period of time, but I haven't heard of any issues with any Rowan Klingner or any other modern formulations. Some other ones, Noodler's Eternal inks, especially like the Russian and the UK inks, they tend to get really clingy and be tough to clean out of the pen and can have some clogging issues and stuff like that, so you have to use them pretty regularly, clean them diligently and stuff like that. They do have light fastness, they are very UV resistant and water resistant and stuff like that, with some colors that you wouldn't find with those characteristics otherwise, but they are some maintenance. The other, like Noodler's Eternals, like Hunter, Fox, Periwinkle, Luxury Blue, all the ones that come in the little 1 ounce bottles, those are all a little higher maintenance as well. Noodler's Kung De Cheng and Whaleman Sepia, their highlighter inks like the Dragon Cat series, and then the Bay State inks are higher maintenance as well. The Bay States are kind of a different breed than all the other ones, and these ones are all just like, they're a little tougher to clean, you know. But the Bay States, they will not clean up with your normal cleaning chemicals, you know, like dish fluid and pen flush and stuff like that. But if you're using a Bay State ink, bleach is what cuts through the Bay States. So you don't want to use straight bleach, but just a dilution of like regular household bleach, which is already very diluted. Use like 10% of that to 90% water. Clean that through the pen, and that will cut through the Bay State pretty well. Also, if you're like get Bay State stain in your kitchen sink or whatever, use like a Bonami or like some kind of bleach solution, and that'll clean that out pretty well. Other ones are inks with heavy sheen, like the Jayarbon 1670, so like Rouge Hematite, Stormy Gray, the New Blue Ocean. Those all have like a gold fleck in there, so they're going to, you know, they put a disclaimer on the bottle saying like highly saturated ink, watch out. But you know, basically it doesn't cause any permanent harm. It just means that if you let it dry up in your pen, it's going to clog and you're going to have to really flush it out to clean it. Those actually clean up pretty well with just water though. And then other inks like Diamine Majestic Blue is one that I can think that's really got a heavy sheen to it. Private Resort Electric DC Blue, Noodler's Autumn and Azure. Those are some other, especially dark blues that I can think that have kind of those characteristics. Other ones, Super 5 and Diatramentis Document inks. Those are permanent inks that I don't really know how they attain their permanence. I know they're not iron gall, but I don't know exactly what they are, but they tend to be kind of clingy as well. Both of those absorb really quick into the paper, and they dry really fast. So I don't think that they're formulated exactly the same as the Noodler's permanent inks, because they seem to have some different characteristics, but I don't really know, honestly, what they're made of. But I do know they're a little more work to clean out. So I'd watch out for some of those. Just be aware that pretty much, if I had to make one general statement, I would say any ink with permanent properties, it's going to be harder to clean. That really covers about 95% of all the troublesome inks out there is ones with permanence. So if you really want an ink that is trouble-free, go with a very desaturated, non-permanent ink, especially something that comes from a pen-making company like a Lamy ink or Waterman or Pelican or something like that. Those are all going to be pretty safe inks, you know. But in general, that's a pretty good thing to go off of. And you know, if you're watching this and you have any other inks that you know that are kind of, you know, tougher to clean out, go ahead and leave in the comments too, because this isn't an exhaustive list that I have here. but it's covers some of the big ones. Next question I have is from at Toby Deemer on Twitter. Asked, please recommend an offensively bright blue that is also rather wet and as low maintenance as possible. Is there such a thing? Okay, you know, when you're asking for an offensively bright blue, I mean, Noodler's Bay State Blue is by far the brightest blue that I can think. However, it is not low maintenance. But, you know, I just talked about some of these inks that are, you know, harder to clean out and stuff like that. Bay State Blue is not so bad when you cut it with bleach. But however, if you have a demonstrator pen like a TWSBI 580 or something like that, and you can see the ink or platinum cool, where like you can see through the grip and the feed and everything, it's going to be hard to like get that thing squeaky clean, even with the bleach, because you got to get that thing everywhere and really work it in. It's going to be kind of tough to get it squeaky clean after using Bay State Blue. It's just to clean out every little nook and cranny. You can do it, but it just takes a lot of work. So if you really like that blue ink, what's best is to take a less expensive pen and just dedicate it to using Bay State Blue. That's what a lot of people end up doing, just because they love the blue. There is no replacement for that ink, but they hate cleaning out the pen. So if you just use it continuously in one pen, yes, it'll be stained, but who cares? You know what I mean? That kind of thing, especially if you're using something that's not a demonstrator. But the number one ink that I recommend as an alternative to that Bay State Blue, which does set the standard for bright blue inks, is actually a Jysung Eclat de Saphir. It's not the same, but it has kind of a purplish tone to it like Bay State Blue does. It's pretty vibrant, pretty bright, but it flows really nicely and it cleans really easily out of the pen. That is actually one of the lowest maintenance bright blue inks that I can name, is that Jysung. And also another good one is another Noodler's Blue or Blue Eel. They're the similar shade of blue, but Blue Eel is wetter. So since you asked for a bright blue that is rather wet, I would lean you towards Blue Eel, because it's going to still give you some of that vibrance that you pick up in the Bay State Blue. It doesn't have as much of a purple kind of shade to it. It's more of kind of a true royal blue, but that one would definitely get you there. Got a couple of troubleshooting questions this week. First troubleshooting is from MKB on Facebook. I have a converter in my Platinum Cool pen. I can't get the plunger to move anymore. In hopes that it's just dried out, I'm soaking it in pen cleaner. Any other suggestions? Yeah, it's not so much a dry out thing. You can soak it all you want, but really what you need is you need to grease it up. And if I had really thought about it ahead of time, I might have grabbed one of the converters. Do I have one? I might. Yes. Okay, hang on. I don't know where most everything is in my office, but I do have, I've got like a tub here of just like converters and cartridges and random stuff like that. Do I have a platinum one on hand is the question. I'm afraid I may not. Oh no. Oh no. I might have all my platinum ones in my various platinum pens, which I could spend like half an hour sorting through. Dang, I don't have it. Okay, well, that was a good effort, Brian. So I don't have one to actually show you in a demonstration, but I can at least talk through it. So the platinum converter, if you look at it, it's got a big gold metal shroud that covers the piston mechanism inside that converter. Well, if you can actually unscrew that thing and then pull it out, grease up the seal a little bit, screw it back together, and that thing is going to be better than new, because they're usually a little stiff even when they come straight from the factory. If you don't want to actually disassemble the converter, and this goes beyond the scope of just a platinum converter, this goes for any converter that you want to do this with. You take a little bit of silicone grease, and you take a toothpick, and you kind of dip the toothpick in the end of it, and you stick that toothpick up in the converter and just kind of rub the grease along the walls of that converter, and then move that piston up and down. That's a good alternative to disassembling the whole thing. So you have your piston all the way up in the converter, get a little bit of grease around the walls of the converter, move it up and down, it'll get on the piston seal, and it'll operate like new. It works fantastic. Next troubleshooting question is from Po T on Facebook. How should I handle my Preppy so that it does not crack? I handled my Preppies with care and I did not drop it. However, it seems that simply normal cap opening and closing is enough to create cracks on the cap. You know, I've been getting more and more reports of this recently. It's always been, you know, it's a $4 pen, so it's not the most durable pen that you could possibly get. It's pretty good for the most part. However, you know, from time to time I would get people that would have it crack. Usually it was in the kind of situation like somebody had dropped it or they're carrying it around in their backpack and it's getting rattled around and crushed and stuff like that. That is not super unusual. Doesn't happen all the time, but it's common enough where it's like, okay, just handle it a little more carefully. However, I've gotten enough of your feedback from you and others recently, and I would say recently like in the last, you know, since 2015 started, where people are like, hey, I've had my pen for a month and I don't even use it that often, and the thing is, the cap is cracked on me. I'm like, that's weird. So I have recently reached out. I've seen enough of a trend now where I know that it hasn't always been this way. So I contacted my distributor for Platinum, and they said, hey, look, yes, Platinum has also seen this trend. They're already on it. They're making some fixes to make sure that doesn't happen. If you notice, they changed the design of the Platinum pens at the end of 2014. I don't know all the dirty details, but something along, you know, there were some changes that were made to production or whatever, and there were some quality issues with some of the caps. So they are aware of that, and I'm told they've already made a fix for that. So you shouldn't be seeing that now on the preppies that we're selling. So that said, if you bought a pen, especially from us at Goulet, go ahead and it's cracked on you, especially if you bought it like in 2015 and it's just normal wear and tear. Obviously, if you're still carrying it around and like you drop it on the concrete and it cracks, okay, you know, like that's on you. But if you're using it just normally and the thing is, and you know it shouldn't be cracking like that and it cracks, let us know. We'll replace it for you and we'll handle that with Platinum. But I've talked to them and they've said, hey, look, this is something that we've known as a potential issue. Go ahead and do those exchanges and stuff and we'll work it out with you. So that's what I would say is email info@gouletpens.com if you have bought a pen from Goulet and Preppy and you've had a cracking issue. That said, moving forward now, we shouldn't be seeing that quite as much. So we'll just have to, time will tell. We'll see if that works out. All right, I got a couple business questions. This is a really good one from Jysung on YouTube. I was really excited to take this one because they asked, how much research and preparation do you do for the Q&As? It seems like a lot of content to have to prepare for on such a regular basis. You are correct. It is a lot. And I actually like kind of sat down and really thought through the whole process. And you know, this is the 75th one now that we've done over a year and a half. So it has been a bit of a process change from the beginning, but I'm going to explain the process as it is now because that's what it is now and it'll be moving forward. You know, back in the day, you know, it wasn't as time involved and stuff like that, and I was doing a lot of it myself, or I would do a lot of the components myself. I have more of the team involved now, so I'll go ahead and share you what my modern process is, and this has been for the last 5 or 6 weeks. So it's definitely probably more effort than you might think. I don't know how much effort you really think it is. The actual like research and product knowledge is actually not as much of the work as you might think. Part of it is just like my brain has so much pen stuff in it that a lot of it is just like, oh yeah, I can answer that very easily. Or it's like, oh, I don't know the answer to that, but I could find out in like 5 minutes because I just know everywhere to look online for certain pen knowledge. So it's like, if I don't know it, I know who will know it or how to find it on Fountain Pen Network or certain bloggers or whatever. Just Googling certain phrases I know will bring me to exactly what I want. So that is definitely, I'm reaping what I've sowed over the last 6 years of being completely and 100% immersed in fountain pens. So that said, the first thing that we do is we start out and we post asking for questions on Twitter and Facebook, and then we always have kind of just standing out there on YouTube and on the blog. Anytime there's questions, we'll go back and look at the previous week's Q&A to see if there's any questions that have come up through the comments there, but we specifically solicit for questions on on Facebook and on Twitter on Monday. It used to be Tuesday. We're moving more towards Monday now just to give you more time to ask your questions, and that just tends to work a little bit better for us. That doesn't take long, just a few minutes to actually post that. As questions are coming in, Madigan manages our Twitter account and Margaret is on our Facebook account. So the two of them are both monitoring those questions and they're compiling them. We've got a Google Doc that we all share, and so they're both compiling them into a format that is something that we can use and kind of turn into the questions here. So things like who posted the question, what is the question, what's the general category of it, you know, have we answered it before, that kind of thing. So we've got this big running, you know, spreadsheet of all these questions, and that it really varies depending on how many questions there are, but it's probably, you know, a couple hours or so that it takes to actually compile all of those, and it's, you know, they kind of check in periodically and just add them as questions come in. And then Margaret and I sit down and go through, usually on like Wednesday afternoon. We might be moving it a little sooner because I shoot the Q&As on Thursday mornings. So it's more like Wednesday afternoon that we've been going through and kind of selecting the questions. I used to just select the questions completely on my own, but now that I have more help on my media team, I want to respond to people whose questions I'm not going to answer. I personally haven't been able to go back and do it myself, but I've been working with Margaret. She's great. Just because a lot of the questions come through Facebook, that's why I do it with Margaret. But Madigan will go back on Twitter too and respond to you as well. We'll go through and kind of choose the questions, and I'll think through like, I know this question, but I feel like I've answered it. I'm like, if I haven't answered it in like the last several months, I don't really sweat it. You know, we've got 75 Q&As now. And there's over 1,000 questions that we've answered. So it's really, I say we, you know, I'm the only one sitting here in this room, but, you know, as far as like choosing the questions goes, it's really kind of based on, you know, the quality of the question, how confident and competent I feel I am at answering the question at that point in time, whether or not there's a lot of other confusion around certain things. You know, if there's a question about stuff that's been going on recently or certain products that have recently been released, I'll try to pick like more timely, relevant stuff. But there's also really good just like timeless questions that I like to take too. So it's really kind of just like a gut feeling that I have to go through and pick certain questions. And I'm working with Margaret, and she's kind of starting to get, you know, I'm getting in her head a little bit about like the kinds of questions that I would generally pick and generally not. You know, if something is like super specific and detailed and just it would take me 2 minutes to read the question, I'm not going to choose that one. Or if it's something that's like so open and generic, like, how do I get my pen to write better? It's like, there's 50 ways I can answer that question. You know, I'm not going to take something that general. So I try to take stuff that's specific enough, but broadly applicable. So there is kind of a fine balance there. So usually we end up with, you know, 20 questions or so that have been vetted, you know, and so Margaret and I sit down, I'll be like, hey Margaret, can you go respond to this person? Here's the answer, go back, and she'll take, because it takes, you know, a couple hours to go back and do all that stuff that I just don't have right now. So she'll go back through and answer your questions on Facebook or whatever, and you know, the things that I'm not going to answer in the Q&A. But if we are going to answer in the Q&A, we flag them as ones that we are going to answer, and then we have to copy them out of that document and format them into my program here that we prepare for the blog. Once that's done, once the questions have been chosen, I kind of put them into different categories, and then you know, going through all that takes us about 30 minutes to read through. We usually end up with between 40 and 50 questions each week. So reading through all those and deciding which ones we answer and which ones don't takes about half an hour if we were really like focused and rocking and rolling on it. And then you know, we'll get like Jenny or Madigan to kind of weigh in specifically if we're like on the fence about a certain question. We'll be like, have we done this one before? Do you remember, Jenny? And you know, so we'll kind of get everybody in on it if we need to. And then, you know, once we selected, formatting it takes, oh gosh, probably about 30 minutes, literally just to format it with the whole, like, because, you know, we got to like choose your name, and then, you know, if it's on Facebook, we don't want to use full names because you might not have a public account, so let's do first name, last initial. That's why we do it that way, for kind of privacy reasons. And then we will, at that point, that's pretty much like Wednesday. And then, as it is right now, I spend my Wednesday night, every night, for about 2 hours going through and bullet pointing answers to all of the questions. I could just wing it, honestly, for most of these, but I would end up speaking so generally that I wouldn't feel that it would be as effective, because a lot of the questions I am answering can be pretty specific and have a lot of products that need to be said. And honestly, that stuff needs to be written down anyway, so I might as well write it down as I'm composing my thoughts, and then I can reference my notes in the video. So really a lot of it just kind of comes out of my head. There might be certain things where it's like if I'm getting questions about like, oh, what ink will match best to this? I'm like, oh geez, you know, I've got some ideas, but let me go pull up the swab shop and I'll take a look and be like, oh yeah, that's right, these ones, bam, I'll write them down, and then we'll be in good shape. So then after that, once I've gone through, it takes me about 2 hours probably to go through all the questions and really think through. At that point, I probably narrowed it down to about 14, 15 questions or so for that week that I'm gonna go with for sure. They're all categorized, and I'm like, all right, I'm doing these ones. And then I'll kind of go through, I'll think through like, okay, are there any products that I would want to pull to show in the video? How am I going to answer all these questions? What products do I need to link to? That kind of thing. And I'll kind of think through all that. And then Thursday morning, I'll finish prepping and preparing if I need to. Jenny will help me like set up the lights and format the card, the camera, and do all the staging and stuff. And then I shoot it, which takes usually about an hour. And then Jenny, after I shoot it, I give the card to Jenny. She'll upload, edit it, and get it on YouTube. And then Madigan will go on the blog and help to hyperlink to all of the products that are mentioned, which is pretty straightforward at that point because I've already bullet pointed out every product that I'm planning on shouting out to. So she'll go through and just link everything up. And then either Madigan or Mike or I will write like a short description, as an intro for the podcast, for the YouTube, and then linking up like meta tags on the blog and YouTube and all these different little components that all of us on the team will do at various points in time. And all that stuff takes probably an hour or two of different people's time. And then Thursday, that's kind of all happening on like Thursday afternoon after it's been shot, and it's like really locked in as to what we're doing. Then Friday morning, Jenny, Mike, Madigan, and Margaret are all kind of cleaning up the blog, working on the copy, getting everything polished, getting everything ready to be published, which we do, like midday on Friday. We shoot for like lunchtime on Friday, Eastern time. So when all is said and done, it's roughly, I don't know, probably 12 to 14 hours of everybody's time to do a single Q&A. So an hour-long Q&A takes about 12 to 14 hours, and that's a really rough estimate, but that's what it takes to make this magic happen. Even with all the product knowledge that I've amassed and the experience that I have doing it, that's what it takes. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you appreciate it. We love doing it, and it really helps to keep us kind of on a regular pattern. And I know it's something that a lot of you have worked into your like regular routine, which is why I hate canceling it like I had to last week when I was sick, just because I know how regular it is for a lot of you. But I've really come to enjoy it. I have no plans to stop doing it. It's something that I greatly just enjoy for myself. It keeps me fresh, keeps me involved. I get to just kind of like spout off a lot of things I know. It keeps me in the research as well, so I really enjoy it. So that is my not so brief answer about how a Q&A is published. Next question I have about businessy stuff. Tim P on Facebook said, what is the most unusual place that the Goulet Pen Company has shipped an order? Well, I don't know, I've never actually been to any of these places. There's just like countries that I just really haven't heard of. There's kind of like 3 that come to mind, okay? We actually literally just like yesterday shipped to Brunei, which is a very small country in Southeast Asia, and it's just outside of Malaysia. And so I don't really know much more about it. I looked up the Wikipedia page and linked it up if you want to know about Brunei. Also Malta. We actually have like several very fervent fans on Malta. And so, you think that's like in the Mediterranean near Italy there. So that was kind of cool. There's been several other like smaller countries we ship to. We'll ship anywhere in the world that USPS will ship to, which I think is about, I can't remember, 120 countries? It's either 120 or 170. I can't remember. It might be 170. It's a lot of countries. Basically anywhere that's not like a conflict country they'll ship to. So, we'll ship just about anywhere. The other one that I shipped to that I specifically remember was so strange was we don't ship a lot to China, believe it or not, which in fact, I don't think China even allows Google to be streamed on their internet. So, we don't have a Chinese audience watching our YouTube channel that I'm aware, unless maybe there's some other way or they've changed their policy or something like that. But I know that's how it was in the early days. But every now and then we'll ship to China. And the specific instance that I will remember is this small town, and this customer had to actually email us. They were an American that was in China. He had to email us because the town that he lived in didn't have like roads and addresses and stuff like that. So he literally had to email us directions in Chinese characters for the Chinese like postal carrier to have instructions about how to get to his house. So it was like, there was a general address of like the town, and then he had to send us in literally like a paragraph that we taped onto the box for the Chinese mail carrier to be able to deliver it when it gets to his town. So that was definitely one of the more unusual circumstances. That was like 4 years ago. That was a really long time ago. That was one of the most unusual circumstances I've ever had. Got some good personal questions this week. Actually, a lot of personal questions, and that's how I'm gonna take it home for this Q&A. So I got 4 of them, 4 good ones. So here we go. First one I have, Gary W. on Facebook. What was your major at Virginia Tech? Now I could make this a short answer or a long one. I'm going to try to answer it a long answer in a very short period of time. So here we go. My major technically when I graduated was residential property management. Actually, that was like the concentration. I forget, it was like, I can't remember the name of my own major. Housing and urban development or something like that, it was like liberal arts and human sciences and housing and resource management with a concentration in residential property management. Something like that, very long and complicated, but we just called it residential property management. So that was my actual graduation. But what happened was when I went to Virginia Tech, I was applied early decision, and I knew I wanted to be in the Corps of Cadets. Because I was in Navy ROTC in high school, and I was just like, ate leadership for breakfast. So I wanted to have a very difficult experience in college. So I wanted to be in the Corps of Cadets. It's a military school within the university population. It's unique to Virginia Tech and Texas A&M. They're the only public universities that have a Corps of Cadets within their school. But if you think about like VMI or West Point or the Naval Academy or anything like that, those are all military schools. But this is a military school within a larger university, which is unique to Tech and Texas A&M. So that's what I went through at Virginia Tech. So I went in, I knew I wanted to do Corps of Cadets. I didn't know what major I wanted, so I just went in as the general undecided major, which they call university studies. So that's how I went in, but I was thinking in the back of my mind, like, oh, I want to be an engineer. You know, it's like Virginia Tech has a big engineering thing, and I like math, I like building things, so sure, I'll be an engineer. Why not? Never mind the fact that I was like a pretty good student. I was like a B+ student, but I wasn't like a genius academically. I would always rely on my charisma and my creativity to get me through the other aspects of school. I did a lot of extracurriculars as well. I was in like FCA and a French club and beta club, and I was in show choir, and I was in band, and I was in a lot of different things. I was on the track team, you name it. I did marching band for a while. So when I went in, my major was not like my main focus. So I was thinking like, oh, I'll do engineering, but you have to apply to transfer in, which is insanely hard to get into, okay, because you have to be really, really good. So I went to my first class, which because I wanted to transfer into the engineering school, I was told, there are certain classes, like certain levels of like the core classes you need to take that will be accepted into the engineering school, because they take like harder English classes and harder history classes, that are geared towards more engineering related stuff than you would if you were, say, a liberal arts major, right? Because it's a big school, so there's a lot of different routes that you can go at a school like Virginia Tech. So I went in, and I went into my first college class ever was some English class that I was taking that was like made for people like engineers and architecture students and these people that were like taking really hard majors. And it's essentially a weed out class, right? They make it super hard so that they try to weed people out of these harder majors. So I went into this class, and it was literally just like the introduction, and we're going over the core curriculum and getting a list of books and stuff to read. And I forget exactly the number of books that it was, but it was something like 8 or 12 different like huge novels that we were going to have to read for this class. And I hate reading, like, for the most part, honestly. I like business and leadership and stuff like that, and I like reading like blogs and like stuff related to things I'm interested in, but like just general like novels and historical fiction and stuff like that, it's like, it is not my cup of tea. So when I got this list, and I was just like, this is one class, and I'm in the Corps of Cadets. Like, I'd just been through boot camp for Corps of Cadets and gotten the crud beat out of me in that. Not literally beat out of me, but like, I'd gotten, my soul just like completely like crushed going through boot camp, and I didn't know anything that was going on, and I'm in this new school, and I'm away from my parents, and I have all these people yelling at me, and I'm doing push-ups all the time, and a lot of emotional things going on in that type of scenario. So going from that, and then it's like, here's my first class for this major that I'm going to have to try to transfer into, and I'm not even sure I want to do anyway, and I'm going to this English class, and this professor is just like totally just like not caring at all. They're like literally just trying to weed people out of this class, and just gives us this huge list of these books that I've never heard of and have no interest in reading. And I was like, I don't think that this is for me. So I literally, from that class, I left and walked to my guidance counselor and was like, I don't want to be an engineer. This wasn't even an engineering class. This was an English class for engineering students, but I was like, I don't want to do this. What else can I do? And they're like, well, what do you like to do? Blah, 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 blah. And so I was kind of talking. They were like, I think you like business. And I was like, yeah, I do like business. I've businessy things. I've done like, things. I've been like power washing decks and fixing things, Mr. Fix-It, and I've been painting and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I like business things. I'm kind of entrepreneurial. Is there a major for that? And they're like, yeah, we have business management, and you can get a concentration in entrepreneurship. And I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Why don't I do that? Just go ahead and put me in there. And they were like, well, you can't just transfer in. You have to apply. And you can't apply until you have such and such math credits and so on and so forth. And I was like, well, when can I apply? And they were like, your sophomore year. And they're like, it's going to take you 2 semesters worth of work to be able to even apply. And I was like, well, what's the transfer rate of getting in there? And they were like, 30%. I was like, really? So I have a 30% chance of working for my first year to be able to then get into the business program. And I was like, oh crap, this is going to be hard. I was like, well, I really want to do business, so I'm just going to go for it. And if I don't, I'm going to have to figure it out from there. So I worked my tail off my freshman year, ended up with like a 3.2. Like I studied you wouldn't even not believe how much I studied, because I was in the Corps, I was in the marching band within the Corps, and basically you just study all the time. You had like 4 hours of mandatory study hours every night in the Corps of Cadets. Like they're big on studying. So I would like go to class, march, do all the Corps stuff, and study, and that's it. That's all I did my freshman year. Literally, I'm not joking. Rachel wasn't at Virginia Tech at that point. She was at another school. She didn't transfer in until her sophomore year. So my whole freshman year, that was all I did, and I managed to get a 3.2. So I'm not like super academic, right? And that's okay. But anyway, so I told you I was going to be short on this question, but so then I ended up transferring in, got accepted, thank goodness, in the School of Business. Did that for a while, a year and a half. I get midway into my junior year, and I'm really starting to feel like a cog in the wheel in the management program there, because it's not entrepreneurship like you think of, like, hey, I started this business, this is really exciting, generating lots of ideas. No, it's literally like business management in a university setting of that size. There were 450 business majors in my graduating class. So it was like you were totally just plugged in. It was like a very university, academic, corporate type of environment. You're studying like union negotiations with management and all this stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is not what I was thinking that it was going to be. I was like, but I was getting through it. I was doing pretty okay for most of my classes. But I discovered they had a program in the liberal arts college, of all places, about residential property management. So it's real estate, which is much more entrepreneurial than this kind of corporatized business management generalized major. So I discovered that, and I was like, this is really cool. It's in a smaller college within the school. I was like, it's not technically a business degree, it's a liberal arts degree, but it's still it still had all the business requirements. So like all my classes would transfer right in. There were just a couple of classes that I would need to take over summer school, and then I had to do an internship, which I couldn't do until I finished certain classes. So I actually had to do a 6-week internship for graduation after I kind of graduated. So after my senior year, I had to do a 6-week internship before I could actually get my diploma. So I ended up doing that. So I went through the Corps of Cadets, transferred into the School of Business with all these extra classes, and then transferred out of that into another major with all these extra classes with a whole 12 credits of summer school that summer. And then I had to do an internship after I graduated. So I really took like the scenic route to get through. Not quite as much as Rachel did. She had like 5 different majors, but she had quite the journey as well, changing schools and everything. So it wasn't as drastic as it could be. But I'm totally like that statistic about number of times you change your major in school and stuff like that. I was right there. But So I ended up graduating residential property management. I really enjoyed that major. And then I had a really great time in that major. And then I did my internship and I hated it. And this was in 2006 is when I graduated. Real estate was like, you were an idiot if you weren't involved in real estate, because you could be anyone and making money in real estate at that point. But I was looking at it and I was like, this is not going to last forever. No, it is not. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to get into real estate. I'm not really going to learn anything because no one knows how to do anything in real estate now. They're just riding the wave. You really learn how to do your best when things are crashing and burning, because that separates the wheat from the chaff, right? But when things are on the rise, like, anybody can make money in the dot-com bubble or stock market's going crazy. Everybody thinks they're a great investor. So it's like, I'm going to get on some company and I'm not going to learn anything. And then it's going to start to crash, and the first one to go is going to be the new kid that doesn't really know anything. So I was like, they're going to either just like drive me into the ground or whatever. So I'd gotten a name your own price offer upon graduation from a big commercial real estate company in Richmond here to be a commercial real estate manager. And I would be like traveling around multi-states and all this kind of stuff, managing these properties. And I was like, I don't have any idea what I'm doing with all this stuff. And it's like, this is going to be a really tough road. And part of the whole reason that I didn't want to actually go into the military, because I originally was going to, I had a scholarship and everything, I turned it down because I met Rachel, and I knew that like we were going to be together and we were going to start a family and all this stuff. So I knew like 3 weeks into our relationship, like we were headed down that road. So I turned down my Army scholarship, and I still went through the Corps of Cadets because I wanted to, but I was not actually in ROTC in college. So I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to be away from my family, basically. Just more power to all of our military personnel who are. I can only imagine how hard that is for families. And I knew that for me, that was not my path, so I didn't do it. But as I started to look down the road of real estate and moving up the track, if you will, in managing commercial real estate, I was like, it's going to be the same darn thing. Like, I'm going to be managing multi-state properties, I'm going to be traveling and on the road all the time, and I'll be away from my family. If I was going to be away from my family all the time, I would have gone in the military, because I'm like very much leadership oriented like that. I would have really done well, I think. So I turned down a name your own price offer upon graduation so that I could power wash houses with my dad, because he had started a business while I was in my senior year of college, power washing houses. And I wanted to learn about running a small business and work with my dad. That was the most precious 2 years of my life I've ever had, was working side by side with my dad. And I'll never get that time back. And it helped me to build some of the foundation of what I've taken and done with Goulet pens, was having that mentorship with my father and having that experience of just going out and just bucking kind of the path that the academia would throw you on, and just starting something and just being creative and coming up with all these different ideas and having them fail and all these different things that I got to do with my dad. And funny enough, had I not done that, I would never have had the seasonality that you have in a power washing business to then give me some free time to explore woodworking, which was another passion of mine, which ultimately got me into pen turning, which ultimately got me into fountain pens, ink, paper, retail, and so on. So it really, if had I gone down the route of real estate or the route of any other type of business, really, upon graduation, I would not be here where I am with Goulet pens right now. So that's coming full circle on this question. A nice long answer for you, but because I was able to go down that journey and was constantly exploring something that was ideal for me and who I am, I ended up being able to be in a position where I could be able to build up kind of what we have here at Goulet Pens. And then it started that journey, which is a whole other story in and of itself, but now you understand a little bit more about my college background. Next question I have is from Bill E. on Facebook. I'm about as obsessive about watches as I am about fountain pens. So what brand of wristwatches does Brian enjoy wearing? Well, Bill, you get the Hustler Award here. You've been asking about this question and reminding us weekly about my watches. I appreciate your fervor, okay? And I like watches too, so I don't mind talking about them so much. I enjoy a good watch. I have a Bulova on right now. It's an automatic. I love automatic watches. I love skeleton watches. I'm very utilitarian just in life in general. So I love building things, I love seeing how things work, so I love fountain pens, I love tinkering with them, taking apart, all that kind of thing. That's part of the appeal for me. It's not so much the romanticism, it's the utility for me. So that said, very similar kind of thing with watches. I like the style and all that kind of stuff. I'm not so much into like the design, other than I think it looks cool. Just very kind of superficial level. I like it. I like the weight. I like the way it feels, that kind of thing. But really, I love the function. And the watches that are most appealing to me are ones where they're intricately, like, functionally designed. So that's kind of cool. So like this one that I have, it's got like the double latch thing, which is kind of cool. I love the way that works. It's got the, it's an automatic, so there's no battery, so it's self-winding. So, and then you can see that in the clear part in the back, so I can just like take it off and just like watch the thing go around and around. I can see all the gears turning, and it's got the little doohickey that's like spinning back and forth. I don't know what it's called, sorry. I like chronograph watches that do all the different things, So for me, it's not so much about one particular brand, though I have like 8 or 9 different watches at this point. None of them are super expensive. The nicest watch I have by far is the one that got me on this whole kick, was a Movado that Rachel got me for my 30th birthday. Because I had a slight interest in some watches like way long ago, like in college and stuff, but I had no money. So I just like, I was like, oh, watches are kind of cool. Whatever, like stamp that out because I can't afford anything. So I won't even get into that hobby. But as I'm now in a better, I guess, financial place, running a business and whatnot, a watch serves a very functional purpose for me. It's design and stuff too. I really don't have a lot of other hobbies, so the watches are one thing that I can kind of like enjoy, daily, along with my fountain pens and so on. It's, it's very much of a kind of a tangent from like the whole fountain pen thing. So yeah, for me, I have a couple of Bulivas, so I like those. I have that one Movado. And then the other ones I just have are much less like name brand. I've got like a Fossil, and I have a couple of Skagen watches, which are really cool. They're very thin. They're from Denmark, so those are kind of neat. And then just some other like no names. I got like a Kenneth Cole, more like fashion watches, which you'd call, instead of then like fine watches. Just ones really that I like for the design. So what I end up doing is I end up buying different watches that have different color bands or faces or whatever that kind of like match whatever I'm wearing. So I tend to have a lot of like grays and whites and stuff because I wear a lot of neutral colors most of the time, or I've got some that have like different blue accents and stuff like that. So I'll usually kind of match it up a little bit, and it just kind of keeps things fresh and interesting, and it just gives me something to kind of look forward to when I'm getting dressed in the morning, and then I kind of look at it throughout the day, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. I like the little thing, it's a really shiny face, and I just kind of like, ooh, flash it at myself, like I'm a fish or something. Ooh, that's neat. But so that's really about it. I wish it was like more in depth, or I had better things to share with you than that. For me though, it's really like I spend all my time researching fountain pen stuff and business and like how to help my family and like all that. So the watches are something I enjoy, but I have not dove deep into the hobby aspect of it because I just haven't committed the time. All right, 2 more questions. Home stretch. Tim D on Facebook says, since you did a sideways slide from custom pen making to providing us with great selection and value in pens and paper, do you ever get the urge to either make a total change in direction in your entrepreneurship or widen the scope of your company's vision? This is a great question. There's kind of 2 components to it. There's like the personal aspect of it myself, and then like the business vision kind of aspect of it. So the circumstances that I'm in now is completely different than it was when I was pen making and getting into fountain pens, mainly because that previous version of the business was not financially viable, so I was required to explore other avenues, otherwise I wouldn't be able to sustain anything anymore, and so that was really, I was forced to be looking for other things. Now I'm not in that situation. Now it's more just kind of seizing opportunities. So for me, I'm honestly, like, I never envisioned, we have 30 people here now, like I would never envisioned that we would have one hire. Like I thought, no joke, our goal, Rachel and I, it was our goal by the time we had our second child would be for Rachel to be able to work for the business and not have to work a corporate job anymore. Thankfully, we were able to both be able to work in the business within like 10 months, 9 months, 10 months after our first child was born. So it just, we hit a lot of things right. The timing was good. We invested our time and effort and money into a lot of the right things at that time, and we just got some very fortunate things that happened for us to be able to do that. It was very shortly after that that we realized, oh my gosh, this is going to be bigger than just the two of us. So that's when it really started to go nuts, and we knew that would change the whole kind of aspect of going from just being the mom and pop in our house with our kid, you know, that kind of thing. That's what I grew up with my parents. My parents had a business in the house for 10 years. They had like 1 or 2 employees in the house, but it was never like really a company. It was their family business. So I was raised in that environment as a kid. You know, I was like stapling invoices to manila folders and that kind of stuff for a penny a piece. You know, I was working in the business. But that ended up growing so much faster and so much more beyond that earlier than we thought it would, that it really changed the kind of the context of the business. And it's something that is very different now in some ways than it was that first year when Rachel and I were hands-on doing everything. I would spend most of my time, you know, packing orders and on like the fountain pen network and stuff like that. It's stuff that I'm not doing as much anymore. But now I'm spending all my time basically with my team, trying to build up leaders, you know, trying to understand personal communication, public speaking, you know, that kind of stuff, personal development for all of our different leaders and other team members that we have here, as well as the product knowledge and Q&As and spending time on social media and stuff to stay in touch with our customers. So that's really where all my efforts are focused now. So if there was any like personal like entrepreneurship thing to do, probably the only like tug that's on my heart right now is I love working with my hands. That's really originally kind of what got me into this whole thing anyway, was I wanted to make pens, I wanted to be this craftsman. I know that like there's not the opportunity there in the short term for me to be able to do that, like there is for me to be able to do a lot of the cool stuff that I also love doing around here. I am very much in love with what I do around here, and the passion I think just comes through. I have many passions though. I love cycling, I love woodworking and doing that kind of stuff. I love music. I have a very musical background. But some of those passions I have to put on ice for a little while because I'm so all in with our business and my family. My kids are 3 and 5 right now. They're super, you know, like requiring of me to be their father. So in a very hands-on kind of sense. So that's where I'm spending all my efforts right now. So while I do every now and then get a tug to like, you know, get a bunch of musical instruments and practice those on the weekends, or, you know, do some woodworking. I've considered busting out my lathe and doing that. I don't have a workshop right now at all, so while I've considered getting my tools back out and messing around with some of that stuff, it's all a matter of time and effort. So I don't have any of that time devoted to that stuff right now, and that would really be kind of starting over again. So for me, it's like this whole business has come out of something that I just never really expected. It's been just a grand unfolding as I've gone along. So for me, it's like I'm just really enjoying the ride. So I'm going to take this thing, you know, as far as I can go. So that's kind of really the vision. Keeping some guardrails on it, like fountain pens have really been our guardrails for a while. Now we're like just starting to dabble in some roller balls. So now I'm leading a little more from the personal aspect into the business. We've been exclusively fountain pens for years. Now we're starting to get into roller balls a little bit. Very easy, very intentionally, but we're very much easing into it. Certainly, is there a grander vision of could it be beyond just fountain pens and get into other writing instruments? Sure. Like that's down the road, yes, absolutely. I have no like line in the sand of like, I will never ever carry something, you know, because it's like if there truly is a great reason to do it, or you know, our company grows to the size where we find that there is a really underserved aspect of people that love such and such a writing instrument or such and such a whatever else. You know, certainly we could explore that if it makes sense at that time. But the vision for right now is really focusing on enhancing the writing experience, which I believe fountain pens are the most personal writing experience that you can get. However, roller balls are also a great writing experience too, so we are still kind of moving into that avenue, and there's a lot more people that can be served in that way because it's a much more ubiquitous kind of, you know, thing that people know about as roller balls than fountain pens anyway. So we're not like going head first and all that stuff. We're dabbling for sure. But that's kind of the grander vision that I see, would be to getting into a little more of a diversity of writing instruments. Are we going to start selling, iPod cases and, whatever else, water bottles or something like that? No, I don't think so. I think we need to have some guardrails on things. We're not trying to take over the world. We're just trying to run a great company here with a strong emphasis on writing experience. I think if I were to really feel the desire to start, like, let's use watches as an example, right? I just answered a question about watches. If I was really in love with watches, I wouldn't try and make it the Goulet pen company and watch company for me. I think what I would do is I would set up another company if I really wanted to go that route. I wouldn't try and just muddy up the waters with our brain that we built with Goulet pens and just add a bunch of other crap to it, Sorry to use a harsh word there, but add just a bunch of stuff to it. I would rather, if I was to get into a really different avenue, I would rather intentionally set up something new and then work and build that using some of the experience that I've gained in this. But I wouldn't look to go and set up some whole other new thing and just dump it into Goulet pens. So a little insight into my logic there, hopefully. But in the short term, I have no plans to drastically change anything. I'm loving it. I would be perfectly happy if I stayed at Goulet pens for the next decade and maybe beyond. So we'll see. We've only been around for a little over 5 years, so it's hard for me to say what the future is going to hold, but I'm really enjoying this for now. Last question I have has been a nice long extended Q&A today, but at Pen Hall on Twitter, what's your favorite dad joke? I love this question. My favorite dad joke, Rachel hates it when I do this, and it's kind of, I don't even know if this qualifies as the dad joke necessarily, because I've been saying this since well before I was actually a dad. But whenever we drive by a cemetery, it's a little morbid, but whenever I drive by a cemetery with Rachel, I point to it and I say, you see that cemetery over there? People are dying to get in there. And she hates it because I do it every time. And we got a cemetery that we pass like every time we go to church, every Sunday. I don't do it every Sunday anymore, but because she started to get like really mad when I would do it. But now, whenever we drive by a cemetery, I can just kind of like look over at her and just like throw her a look of eyes, and she rolls her eyes at me because she knows like in my head I'm saying that joke. So that I guess kind of would be technically it, but my actual dad joke that I have though is one that I discovered through my son when he was about 3 years old, really into Thomas the Tank Engine. They told a joke on Thomas the Tank Engine. He died laughing at that joke and started telling that joke. It was his first joke that he ever told, and I kind of adopted it now as like the dad joke that I always tell to kids at about his age. So the joke is, what does a snowman eat for breakfast? Snowflakes. And he just loves it, super dad-like there. So that's all the questions that I have for this week. I'm glad to be back with Q&A. I really appreciate you being so flexible and accommodating about me last week, but I'll be back now. Even though I won't physically be in the office next week, I will have a Q&A. I'm going to shoot it tomorrow, so I'll have the Q&A tomorrow being 2 days ago from when this video actually published. It's all very confusing, but still, juggling things around, still trying to make the Q&As happen, so I will have one for next week too. Got a lot of good questions for that one too, so it should be nice and meaty just like this one was. So hope you enjoy it. Before we leave though, if you got any other questions, be sure to leave them on Facebook, Twitter, in the YouTube, or on the blog in the comments, whatever works for you. We'd love to get your questions. But the question of the week that I have for you this week is, what is your favorite dad joke? I really want you to cheese it up good, because I got a son who's 5 who laughs at everything that I say as long as I set it up like a joke. He'll laugh at a grocery list if I say it in the right way. It's just hilarious, and it's like he falls on the floor, and it's so entertaining. He's at that perfect age to do that. So I'd love to know what some of your dad jokes are so that I can go bring them back to my son and make him feel like a superhero to him. So that'd be pretty cool. So thanks so much for watching this week. It's been great. I'm glad to be back. Hope you have a wonderful weekend and a great rest of your week. And right on.